Hey, this is Michael with XForcePC. Wanted to talk to you about our updated Overkill system. Essentially, this is a system where we kind of throw the kitchen sink at things, and we give you pretty much the best of everything. And we've also changed the case around, and that's one of the biggest reasons I wanted to update this video. You can see in the background over here behind me the last Overkill going out based on the Fantex P600S as in Sam, or actually S as in silent. It's the last one we're doing in that case. And silent is a good thing in computers. You want them to be quiet, but these silent features had gotten to the point where you really couldn't use them. It has some covers you can put on the top and the front to make it quieter, but it got to the point where you just couldn't run those covers because the Intel processors are producing so much heat, the video cards producing so much heat, they're just unusable. So we decided to switch to a Fantex high airflow case. So this is the P500A. A stands for airflow. Again, the previous one was the P600S for silent. Here we have an emphasis again on airflow. So what we have is we have a mesh front here and we can just pull and it pops right off. And you can sort of see through it, and it's a coarse dust filter, not a fine dust filter, but a coarse dust filter. And in this case too, we have three 140 millimeter fans. That's the maximum amount of cooling we can put in here. And you may say, why isn't this fan spinning? Well, on some graphics cards, not all, some, you can actually connect a case fan directly to the video card. And on this particular video card we have in here, it does have that capability. And when that capability does exist, we will connect one of the fans to the graphics card. That way, if you're doing something that's real graphics intensive, the graphics card has the ability to say, whoo, I'm hot. Turn on this fan, you know, full blast down here and give me some air. And this blows right into where the graphics card would get its air. These are controlled by the motherboard, so they're more dependent on processor temperature. And as you know, dust is to build up, you can just pull this mesh front off and clean it off and then put it back on. So I did want to explain why that bottom fan was not spinning. Now let's take a look around at the side of the system. Okay, I know there's a fair amount of glare on here. We're not going to worry too much about that, but this is the side. You see we have a tempered glass side. We do have a door that's held on with magnets that can open. I'm sure some of you are going to pause the video now and zoom in and try to figure out every little component that's in here, but all this is subject to change. You have to check the specs on the website because in this human malware world that we live in, we can't guarantee the same memory, the same exact graphics card, the same exact water cooler, motherboard, power supply, etc. All I can do is tell you what we're using now. So this happens to have an EVGA for the win graphics card, and as I mentioned, it has the ability to connect a fan directly to the end of it. And so that's what we've done here. You can see it uses three VGA connections. Some 3080 Ti's will use two. And shoot, this thing may down the road have a 3090. They're talking about a 3090 Ti coming out, things like that. This has the new Z690 chipset. The Z690 chipset has the ability to support DDR4 or DDR5. Right now, DDR5 is being scalped. This is January 7th or 8th of 2022. So we are using DDR4. DDR5 is costing twice as much as DDR4, yet it only provides at this time about a 5% increase in performance. In some cases, DDR4 is actually faster. DDR4 has lower latency than DDR5. But in most cases, DDR5 is anywhere from 0 to 10% faster with an average of maybe 5%. But again, it costs twice as much as DDR4. So we're electing to go with DDR4 at this time. Now, if you're watching this video in the summer of 2022, again, check the specs down below. We might be using DDR5 at that time. It's just right now, at the time of shooting this video, we're on DDR4 because DDR5 is basically being scalped just like the graphics cards are. You can see we have a Corsair water cooler. Again, don't pay too much attention to brand names because of pricing and availability, but generally we use Corsair for water coolers. This is a triple fan water cooler, so 3 120 millimeter fans with the air blowing out, and we have the radiator above the pump, which is always what you want. There's always, even though it's a closed loop system, there's always going to be air in the system, a little tiny bit, and you don't want that air getting to the pump. And the way you do that is you do not make the pump the highest point in the system. So any air bubbles are going to be up here in the radiator. And again, every closed loop system has some air bubbles. We have the Z690 chipset. It's just kind of a iterative upgrade to the Z590. It does support PCI Express 5.0, even though we haven't even managed to saturate the PCI Express 4.0 bus. One big upgrade that we've done is we've moved to a PCI Express 4.0 NVMe SSD. So instead of speeds being limited to 3,000-ish megabytes per second, we're using a higher speed SSD. Again, check the printed specs on the website, but at the time of this recording, the SSD we're using gets about 5,000 megabytes per second, which is, or 5 gigabytes per second, which is extremely fast. And it does a ton of IOPS. It's very, very fast. So that's probably the biggest upgrade on this generation is we're switching to that faster storage. We also have an 850 watt gold rated power supply. This happens to be a Superflower in here. They're a big OEM maker, and they've just recently started releasing power supplies under their own brand name, Superflower, which I have to admit is kind of a weird name. But they've been around for a long time making power supplies for other manufacturers. Now, again, pricing and availability may affect brand names here, so don't necessarily expect a Superflower. We also use Seasonic, and we use EVGA a lot. So that's probably the big one we use the most is EVGA, and they're a well-known manufacturer of power supplies. They have a wide range, from $29 power supplies to $500 power supplies. So in this case, we're using a gold rated 850, so we have plenty of power headroom. Again, I mentioned we have 3 140 millimeter fans in the front, excuse me. We have a triple 120, I just hit my hand on the fan, triple 120 millimeter fan and radiator in the top. And then we're going to move around back, and we have even a little bit more cooling back there. Okay, so we're around back. Again, you can see the I/O here. We have our Wi-Fi antennas, which I will gracefully unscrew here just so they don't obstruct anything. Again, don't sit here and count USB ports and all that stuff because some of this could change. We can't always guarantee that every part is going to be the same as what you're seeing here. Always check the printed specs on the website, but we have a mixture of USB 3.2, 3.1, 2.0. We also have Wi-Fi 6, and obviously we have our audio here. We have our graphics card. Typically, the graphics card has 3 display ports and 1 HDMI. It can support 4 concurrent displays. But sometimes they'll give you 1 more HDMI and they'll take away a display port. But in general, it's 3 display ports, 1 HDMI. Of course, we have the power supply. And we have another 140 millimeter fan here. So basically, we've done maximum cooling on this thing. We've got a fan in every single spot you can put one, and we've got the biggest fans we can get. to get that cooling. Now, let's talk about the 12th gen processor just a bit, the reason why we need all this cooling. The new 12900, and in this case it's the 12900K, it has a hybrid design, and essentially it has 16 cores, but 8 of those cores are called P cores. The P stands for performance, and then it has 8 E cores. The E stands for efficiency. So those 8 P cores can boost up to over 5 gigahertz in ideal scenarios. And the E cores, I think they run somewhere around 3.7 gigahertz, something like that. And the idea is the 8 P cores do the stuff that requires really high performance, like gaming or processing and rendering of video. And the E cores that run at a lower speed, those handle things like background tasks, checking for Windows updates, bringing in a new email if you're in the middle of a game and an email comes in and you've got your email client open, things like that. So it helps take care of those background processes. And I think a lot of this has to do with Intel's trying to compete with AMD's 16 core offerings, and they realized they couldn't put 16 P cores in here, performance cores, because the thing would just like melt. It already is very hot. Let's just put it that way, very hot. And that's why we're going with the maximum airflow case with maximum fans, maximum water cooler, and even then that temperature, if you've got the whole processor loaded, is hovering right at the line that you want to stay under. So again, this is Intel's way of coming out with a 16 core processor but not actually melting it by having 8 performance cores and 8 efficiency cores. Now you have a total of 24 threads. Thread is like an inbox sort of for a processor. And the reason there's 24 is because the P cores have hyperthreading. So you have 8 cores with hyperthreading, that gives you 16, and then you add the 8 E cores to that, and that gives you 24 total threads. This design actually works really well. This is, I think, a little bit of a band-aid by Intel, but I have to admit it does work pretty well. They have, I would say, caught up with and passed AMD Ryzen 5000 series ever so slightly in gaming performance, but we're waiting to see AMD's response to all this. So that's a little bit about the processor and why the overall change. That caused the change to the Z690 motherboard. That also caused the change to the higher airflow case as well, just to evacuate all that heat. So that's an overview of the total overkill system for early 2022.